dereliction of duty looks like. Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has been willfully derelict in his duties as Secretary of Homeland Security. He has disregarded his oath to the Constitution by ignoring the basic tenets of that Constitution. The disaster at our southern border did not happen because of weather anomalies, changes in the governments of 160 different countries, a sudden decrease in the resources of Border Patrol, a sudden decrease in the budget of Homeland Security, or changes to the immigration laws of the United States. The massive millions upon millions of people have crossed our southern border because the Secretary of Homeland Security removed 89 policies from 2 previous administrations. The cause is simple. Migrants tested the system, they called home, and millions came because of the Secretary's catch and release policies. No detention, immediate parole. And the drug cartels seized on the opportunity. They profit from using people who've paid them, to overwhelm the Border Patrol, to sneak fentanyl into our country. You can't make an intellectual argument for anything but that. And the effect on our nation has been devastating. 6.2 million encounters between our northern and southern border. 1.5 million gotaways. Criminal aliens released into the United States. Murderers released into the United States. Rapists released into the United States. And the list goes on. And I'm not even talking about the composition of the 1.5 million gotaways whom we know nothing about and who intentionally avoided being caught and released into our country. 107,000 dead Americans in 1 year alone to narcotics, fentanyl, etc., pouring across our southern border. Alejandro Mayorkas' policies are the cause of all of this. Unfortunately, it gets worse. Today, the United States Congress, under the leadership of Speaker Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans, myself as chairman of the Committee of Homeland Security, and the members of our committee, begin a 5-phase deep dive into the causes and Secretary Mayorkas' orchestration of this tragedy. We have provided a document that details the topics of the 5 phases and provides a small glimpse into what we will be looking into in phase 1, the dereliction of duty phase. What we know right now is that Secretary Mayorkas has either violated or subverted at least 10 laws passed by the Congress of the United States. He has ignored multiple court orders to cease and desist his activities. The blatant disregard for the Constitution of the United States, which states that the United States Congress passes the laws and the executive branch executes those laws, is just scratching the surface to the harm Secretary Mayorkas' dereliction of duty has done to our country. Secretary Mayorkas has blatantly lied to the United States Congress under oath on multiple occasions and lied to the American people at least 58 times. Mayorkas' dereliction of duty has placed the safety of Americans second to his own personal agenda, with hundreds of thousands of dead Americans due to the poison he has allowed the cartels to bring into our country, with the deaths of sheriff's deputies executed by criminal aliens, autistic young women raped, children dead after exposure to fentanyl on the floor of a vacation property. Who in America can feel safe with Secretary Mayorkas' policies? This tragedy has impacted the migrants also, with 30+% of women reporting sexual assaults, almost 2,000 dead migrants at our southern border in just over 2 years. Children lost to a life of forced labor inside the United States of America, and countless others forced into criminal activity to pay their cartel debt. His policies have resulted in a humanitarian crisis this country has never seen. He even admitted his own incompetence, which is also a form of dereliction of duty. By admitting to the United States Senate, he didn't understand the basic strategy of the cartels that he is confronting. He admitted he was unaware of the tracking systems used by the cartels. What general in the United States Army could have such a lack of knowledge of the enemy he is facing and still remain commanding troops? He's also failed the men and women we've given him the privilege to lead, lying about their behavior to support a political narrative, pushing them out of the jobs that they signed up for, forcing them to do impossible missions leading to the highest suicide rate ever amongst CBP. And the most egregious of all, at least to this former soldier, Secretary Mayorkas has put the national security of the United States at risk. Terrorists, suspected terrorists, and enemies of our nation have flooded across our borders. We've previously reported the numbers for the terrorists and the terrorist watch list. But I want to break a little news today. You thought the Chinese spy balloon was bad. This chart here depicts a massive surge in Chinese nationals, many of whom are military-age men, many with known ties to the PLA, ties to the CCP, who have crossed our southern border and just been released by Secretary Mayorkas into the United States. We have no idea who these people are, and it's very likely, using Russia's template of sending military personnel into Ukraine, China is doing the same in the United States. We already know that there's a Chinese listening station just across 90 miles of ocean in Cuba. That frustrates the American people, just like the spy balloon frustrated Americans. How about 10,000 Chinese nationals illegally crossing into the United States being released into our country this fiscal year? Today's hearing will begin the process of digging into all of the details, the cause and effect of Alejandro Mayorkas' dereliction of duty. I hope the American people will listen intently. I hope the press will report this honestly. I hope the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief charged with the security and protection of this country, will listen. He can't possibly know of all of these failures of Mayorkas and have not fired him already. Again, thank you for being here. I will be followed by the Chairman of the Border Subcommittee, Chairman Higgins.
Thank you, Chairman Green. Secretary Mayorkas' failures have been clearly felt across the country and in every sovereign state. He's to be held accountable because he's sworn oath to protect the sovereignty of our nation and serve in the capacity as Secretary in the Department of Homeland Security, which includes an advisor capacity to the President. If the President's policies or the President's agenda ultimately become injurious to the nation, it's up to that executive level secretary to advise that President. We've given Secretary Mayorkas ample opportunity to step back from the injury that he's brought upon our country. We've asked him point blank, please resign, to save the nation the pain of the reveal of your failure. And yet, he stubbornly has remained in place, continuously comes before Congress and lies. We've had countless interactions wherein clearly we've revealed colossal failure and the disintegration of our sovereignty at the southern border, the horrific impact upon our nation. In fact, it's quite reasonable to look at our current era at this point in American history and consider how the next generation will reflect upon this time. Secretary Mayorkas' failures have brought generational trauma upon our country. The next generation will look back and say, what was America like before the Biden-Mayorkas era? and what is it like after. This is how painful his service as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security has been to our country. So we're going to judiciously and calmly, patiently lay out the case and the details regarding Secretary Mayorkas' dereliction of duty. We take no pleasure in doing so. My colleagues on the committee, under Chairman Green's leadership, we recognize this is a solemn affair, but the American people deserve safety and security. At the very least, American citizens expect our sovereign borders to be secure. And when we face a failure of this level, this easily recognized, repeated failure over the course of over 2 years with Secretary Mayorkas, we must act. And constitutionally, that action begins in the Department of Homeland Security's records and the Homeland Security Committee's reveal of the failures. We'll clearly point them out over the course of the coming weeks and months, and we believe that America will come to concur with our assessment that Secretary Mayorkas has completely failed his nation and should be removed from office through the congressional process, or preferably by his own will, or perhaps his president would act. But we have to stop the arterial bleed at our southern border, ladies and gentlemen. We're losing our country down there. I yield to my colleague, Representative Lee, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Clay. For more than 2 years, Americans have endured the negative effects of this administration's failed border policies that have resulted in national security, humanitarian, and public safety disasters at our southern border. This crisis has left imprints across the country, causing every community in America to become a border community. Mexican cartels, transnational gangs, human trafficking groups, and other criminal organizations have taken advantage of our open southern border, engaging in a wide array of criminal activity here in the United States. Among the vilest of the criminal conduct that these groups have conducted here within the United States is human trafficking and the exploitation of children. Last month, we saw the heartbreaking loss of a migrant child who arrived in the United States without a parent or guardian and died in federal custody in Safety Harbor, not far from my congressional district. A Florida grand jury report in March revealed alarming details about the Office of Refugee Resettlement's role in the trafficking of minors. The report details critical failures, both in screening minors and in screening their sponsors. They serve to empower drug cartels and criminal organizations, putting those who cross our border in danger of being trafficked, exploited, or killed. Responsibility for these atrocities falls squarely on Secretary Mayorkas, who has direct hand in the open border policies that have led to empowering these criminals and the humanitarian and legal crisis we presently endure. To make matters worse, fentanyl is being trafficked freely across our southern border, coming into American communities at such a rate that it has become the leading cause of death for people ages 18 to 45. Recently, in my own community, sheriff's deputies seized 11 pounds of fentanyl. And our state's attorney general announced that in recent months, enough fentanyl had been seized to kill every single Floridian. Congress's responsibility here is very serious. Securing our border, enforcing our laws, taking steps to stop unchecked illegal immigration. This is the humanitarian thing to do, and it is our responsibility to ensure the safety of our communities across America. When we fail to enforce our laws, we empower criminals. Today, the Homeland Security Committee is here to share with you our plan to review and investigate Secretary Mayorkas and the failed policies that have led to these atrocities. It is our responsibility to get answers for the American people. We are a nation of laws, and we expect this nation's leaders to follow and to enforce those laws. House Republicans made a promise to keep our nation safe. We passed the most comprehensive border security bill to date, and now we will examine the facts and we will examine the failures of this administration, and we will provide answers to the American people. At the end of the day, our constituents back home and all across this country deserve a nation that is secure, a nation that follows its laws, and to feel safe in their own communities. Thank you.
With that, we will take your questions, and I appreciate my other colleagues joining us today. We'll start right here.
Yeah, what evidence you have that some Chinese nationals crossing the border are connected to the CCP or PLA? And then another question, would impeaching Mayorkas actually fix the problem, or does the rot go deeper within DHS?
The policies are very clearly Secretary Mayorkas's, and he's been made aware multiple times of what has happened. The Senate's hearings, too, have been very comprehensive with him, pointing out his own failure to understand what's going on at the border, et cetera. But they've educated him in the process, and he has not acted. So I believe that the major fault lies with Alejandro Mayorkas. In terms of the verification that the individuals being released into the United States come from or have ties to the PLA, it came from a sector chief. And I'm going to leave it at that at this point. We have a classified briefing coming up on it in the very near future. Right here.
Thank you, Chairman Green. Do you think, or do you plan that for the GOP to use the appropriations process to place contingencies on DHS funding, given the border crisis?
You know, my history as a soldier informs my decisions on this. When a rifle platoon leader isn't using his machine guns well, you don't take the machine guns away from him. You teach him how to use them, or you hold him accountable, or you find a new platoon leader. In this case, we're not going to take the resources away from CBP. They need the appropriations to do their job. In fact, the Border Patrol specifically has been leaving in droves because of the pay discrepancies between them and other members of DHS. So we actually, in our bill that Representative Lee talked about, plussed up a bonus for those guys because, look, they're doing yeoman's work. The last thing we're going to do is hurt those guys. We want to help them. We want to do more for them, more than the Secretary's done.
I'm not talking about taking away resources. I'm sorry, I should be specific. More like placing contingencies on the Secretary and like in his office, kind of, in order to.
No, we're gonna hold the Secretary accountable for his failures, and we're gonna go about it that way, right here.
Do you think there are enough Republicans in the conference that support impeaching Secretary Mayorkas?
We haven't even gotten to that word, that process. Our goal here is we're starting with what you have here, and we're going to get more information about the failures of this this secretary. And when we're done, we'll make a recommendations to the Judiciary Committee, one way or the other, and we'll see what they have to say.
Can I just follow up on,
Yeah.
This would need to be referred to Judiciary, which is the committee that would actually begin official impeachment proceedings. Can you talk about your coordination or conversations with Chairman Jordan about your investigation as this would eventually be handed over to you?
Yeah, I've just kept Chairman Jordan informed in what we're doing, and we as chairman sit down and talk about what we're doing amongst all of the committees, and Sometimes there's a little overlap, so you have to deconflict that. Like everywhere, we all want to kind of take care of our stuff. But Chairman Jordan and I talk weekly about that stuff. Also, Chairman Comer, the three of us kind of looking at some of this stuff. So, in the back, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what do you say to Democrats who say you're trying to kick off impeachment based on policy differences? And then I was also hoping you could explain a little further what the legal basis would be for dereliction of duty.
Well, the legal basis is the violation of the law, lying to Congress. Those are all dereliction of duty. They qualify by the definition of dereliction of duty, whether you look at University of Cornell or Cornell University's definition in their law department, or you look at the United States military's definition in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. What this guy's done, no officer gets to lie to his superior. No officer gets to lie to his, equal. You can't do that. That's a dereliction of your duty. You can't fail to do your job. His job is to secure the border of the United States. He's failed to do that. And if you think 107,000 dead Americans and 6.2 plus 1.5, that's 7.7, if I'm doing my math right, million more people, 30-something states are smaller than that, into the United States, sapping the resources of communities. The parents in Yuma, Arizona, having to go 200 miles to deliver their babies because their hospital's overwhelmed. The dead Americans from, the crime that happens. Think of that sheriff's deputy. I mean, the United States is not secure. His job is to secure the United States. He's failed. That's a dereliction of his duty.
Can you go back to the first part, though, about this being just policy differences?
I don't see I guess I don't understand the question, because when I think of 107,000 dead Americans in 1 year, I don't think this is a policy thing. He either is successful in protecting the American people or he isn't, and he clearly isn't. So, and I want to give the opportunity for my colleagues if y'all have questions for them. Yes, sir, right here.
For Americans that are at home watching this right now, what do you have to say to them about the timing of this announcement and really ramping up this investigation, and why didn't this happen in January, February, right after Republicans?
Well, our priority at first was to get to the border and see what was going on, and we took our border boot camp down there, and then we did a hearing on the border. And then we realized the first thing we had to do was write the bill, right? So, we had to take action to actually secure the border. So we passed, and that was not without, some challenges getting that all put together, as you guys appropriately reported. But once that was done, we immediately started directing our attention to holding Mayorkas accountable. So I think our timing has been about right. It was an accident that today, we did this and we put it on the calendar for the 14th, and then I realized that's the birthday of the United States Army. Perfect, to talk about dereliction of duty after having served for 24 years. I took the oath when I was 17 at West Point to defend the Constitution of the United States. It's very interesting, the oath, and Mayorkas' oath is the same, right? It's not to the geography of America. It's not to the flag. It's to the Constitution, the idea of America, and to the way the Constitution orchestrates how the government is to work. That is, Congress writes the law. It's a brilliant separation of powers. They execute the laws. Mayorkas has written the laws. He's undone the laws without anything in Congress having ever been passed. So, yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask for a timeline?
If you guys want to chime in, just tap me on the back and jump in and answer a question.
A timeline for when you're going to be moving to the 5 phases, and do you think you'll be in a position to make a call on recommending or not recommending something to the administrative, like on 3 steps?
I'll give you a prediction, and I'm not usually prone to doing that when asked by reporters if I should give a prediction, but I would say it's probably going to take about 11 to 12 weeks. That's our front end sort of look, but what we will hold the liberty to do is if there's something else that we need to dig into, delaying a phase. The one that's really going to be challenging from a fact-finding basis is the financial phase, understanding the costs, because we're trying to go to county jails that have illegals that they're having to house, and the local county taxpayers are having to, foot the bill for that. We're going to hospitals all over America and trying to document the uncompensated health care costs that are just going to be transferred to taxpayers. So we want to put a price tag on this, and that may take longer than what we're predicting it'll take, but we'll take whatever time we need.
Can you lay out what
Right
those
here.
phases are?
I gave you one already. Oh, they're in the packet that we get. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, so you said, I know there's a lot of questions about impeachment. You said you haven't gotten to that word, that process. But I mean, one of your own members, Margaret Taylor Greene, filed an inquiry last week. I asked her yesterday, and she said the hearing today, she wants it to be the start of the conference getting on board. So is there a discrepancy in terms of, I don't know, what timeline your members want on your committee and this push?
I would think that you guys are, it's intuitively obvious that Republicans are independent thinkers, right, from the past few weeks. I mean, would you agree? I would say it's intuitively obvious to the casual observer that Republicans are individualists and we think independently. We're not robots being told by a speaker how to vote. And so there are many people with differences of opinions about this. And, I'm in a leadership position. And from my leadership position, the direction of our committee is to get to the facts. So we got time for maybe one or two more, is that right? How are we doing? Okay, right here.
Now, obviously, you're critics of Mayorkas, but you're also critics of President Biden.
Sure.
And if Mayorkas is, in fact, no longer the DHS secretary, President Biden's going to appoint that person.
Sure.
How do you have confidence in President Biden to find somebody who can actually fill that role, and how will removing Mayorkas actually fix the problems you're talking about?
Yeah, look, all I know today is what I can make a decision on today, and I have a responsibility to the people of America. This guy's failing. He's put Americans at risk. I mean, look at that chart. Look at those past several years, very statistically insignificant difference, right? Look at the last year. This fiscal year, I mean, there's something going on here. All on Mayorkas' watch, threatening the national security of the United States. The guy's got to go. Okay? I mean, we're going to hold him accountable. And that's, if the president picks another guy that does this kind of stuff, we'll do what we have to do there too.
Mr. Chairman, the committee has so much on its plate in addition to all of these border issues and issues with the secretary. I know you're ramping up work on cybersecurity and FEMA, and you have said you want to overhaul the entire department. How are you going to get all that done? We're, 6 months in.
We got a great bill done. Check box on the first one. We're starting the accountability of Mayorkas, and simultaneously we're working on the cyber stuff right now. One of the things, and I don't think I've actually said this in the press, but one of the things we want to do is create something very similar to the ROTC program for cybersecurity professionals. And we think we've got a way to pay for it, but we're 700,000 cybersecurity experts short in this country. And so, yes, I think I can't juggle, but I can juggle, if you know what I mean. We'll get it done. Other questions? Maybe one more? Any for these guys? Somebody want to answer? We'll come back to you, and that'll be it.
Thank you very much, Chairman Green. Ultimately, do you think the buck stops with the president? I know you're saying no at the moment for impeaching Mayorkas, but what about impeaching Biden, or and if not impeaching Biden, how to hold Biden accountable, since the buck usually stops with the president?
Well, very clearly, there's a concern about that. We're going to dig into the policies of the secretary, and we're going to hold him accountable. I think the American people getting educated on this, looking and seeing if some of this has been directed from the president. I mean, maybe we find out that we'll act. But right now, we know the decisions being executed from the secretary to the field are what's causing the problem, and that's where we're going to focus our attention today. Now, again, we may discover that the president directed all this, and that's the case, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Thank you.
But my guess is, honestly, in my observations of President Biden, he probably doesn't know all the stuff we're going to show in this report. And I hope when he hears all this, when he sees all this, that he'll act responsibly and take care of the problem. So, all right, guys, thanks for being here. Appreciate y'all.